All right, thank you so much, everybody. Here we go. We are back in session. We are late. We're supposed to start at 3:25. I thought it was 4 o'clock. What do I know? Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you all. Let's all come to order. I'm going to use my gavel, although it's not. Yeah, Linda, clap. All right, there we go. You're back in kindergarten. All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. If we can all come to order. I am really, really excited about this plenary session. This is the moment when we announce our awardees. We give awards to truly outstanding feminists. And I am absolutely thrilled to be presenting these awards today to Kathleen Gasparian, who is receiving the Olga Vivas Award, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And to Deon Haywood, who is receiving Now Foundation's Victoria J. Master Bono Award in Women's Health. I'm not going to spend too much time introducing Kathleen Gasparian. She's a remarkable lawyer. She has an extraordinary story to tell, which she will tell you. I just want to tell you a little bit about the Olga Vivas Award, which she is receiving today. Olga Vivas, it was the former Vice President of Action and the Executive Vice President of National Now. She was a longtime activist in suburban Chicago. She was instrumental in electing Carol Moseley Braun to the United States Senate, the first African-American woman elected to the Senate, and who is currently a co-chair of Now's Advisory Committee, National Advisory Committee. Olga was dedicated. She was an out lesbian for very early on. She's an immigrant and a very outspoken feminist. It is in her, we lost her in 2012, I'm sorry to say, to lung cancer. But it is in her memory and in her honor that we created the Olga Vivas Award to honor women who have given so much, who have done so much work to help immigrants, women of color, LGBTQIA individuals, and other individuals who have traditionally been marginalized in our country. This year, I am so proud to declare Kathleen Gasparian as a recipient of the Olga Vivas Award. And, yeah. Kathleen is the founder of PB&J, which stands for Pro Bono and Juveniles, and I'll let her tell you all about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to apologize from the beginning because I am a lawyer, and if there's one thing a lawyer knows how to do, that's to talk. And so I'm going to start by telling all of you just how odd I am to be here, how odd I am to be in a room of such amazing women. I'm awed to receive recognition for my little project. I'm awed to be considered of the caliber of Olga Vivas. And I am awed by the changes that my little project has wrought, not just for the lives of many immigrant children, but for our community and in my own life as well. And so the story I'm going to tell you today is a little bit about me. It's a little bit about the city of New Orleans. It's a little bit about an international crisis. And it's a lot about kids. And so if I could get all of you to play along with me for a minute, I want you to think about the children that you know in your lives. And I mean children who are 5 or 8 or 10 or 15 or 17. And I'd like you to think about how joyful they are and how amazing they are and how every day is something amazing with them and how full of life they are and how innocent they are and how tough they can be. because those are the kids that I'm talking about, and those are the kids that my project has been working for. And so if you keep those kids in the back of your mind as we talk, I'd appreciate it. So a year ago, this project didn't exist. And a year ago, if you'd asked me to define myself for you, I would say to you, oh, I'm a new mom. My daughter at the time was a year old. And oh, I'm managing partner of this great firm. And definitely, I am a really, really good lawyer in a really narrow, really complicated field of law. And I don't think I would have defined myself as an activist or a networker or a mentor or a leader or any of those things. I would probably tell you that I'm a grinder, that I think one of my biggest skills is being able to take a giant pile of work and grind it out faster than anybody else. And that's sort of how I've always thought of myself, just this really strong work ethic, and I'm a grinder, and that's about it. A year ago, there were some interesting things going on in New Orleans at the time and in Louisiana regarding immigration. Human Rights First had come to Louisiana to have a conference called Left Out in Louisiana to start talking about the immigration issues facing our state. You probably don't realize it, but Louisiana has one of the largest numbers of detained immigrant populations in the United States, and they all happen to be way out in the middle of nowhere. No offense to Oakdale, it's a lovely place, but it's very difficult to get to, and there's lots of access to counsel issues. And so Human Rights First came in, they had this conference and started building a working group, and for the first time we had private bar attorneys and public and pro bono providers starting to get together to talk about some of these issues. What you probably don't also know, or maybe you do, is Louisiana we are challenged for pro bono providers. We are challenged for money. We are challenged for solutions. At the time, we probably had, I think, 3 in the entire state of Louisiana, 3 pro bono providers handling immigrant issues, and one of them only designated to handle issues of domestic violence and what we call U visas for victims of crimes. We also, as part of the aftermath of Katrina, we had a large number of experienced attorneys leave the state of Louisiana and not come back. We had shifts in the demographics of attorneys. We had shifts in the demographics of pro bonos and pro bono providers. And we also have never really had the same sort of structures that larger cities have regarding large firms giving pro bono service. We don't have the same sort of formalized programs. So we have our own unique challenges of Louisiana. At this time also, we had an international crisis boiling, and this is coming out of Central America. So what we're talking about is, I want you to get those kids back in your mind, because this is who we're talking about. So in the spring of last year, so a number of factors came together in Central America to basically create a refugee crisis, where we had a push out of Central America and individuals seeking refuge in the United States. We're talking about 3 countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, filling a geographic size about Oregon. So as the pressure increased, there's no place in the country for people to go to be safe. And what we're looking at is decades of extreme poverty. Hurricane Mitch was a couple decades ago that devastated that region, and the region's not been able to recover sufficiently. You have the difficulties and the problems of of political instability, coupled with lots of drug trafficking and lots of gangs. And we call this narco-terrorism. And the history of these countries had made it such that the conditions for children was untenable. That the children were the most vulnerable, that it'd be very easy for gangs to use these children as pawns against their parents for money, to use these children for drug trafficking and to do gang-related stuff. And then for all the other reasons you would traffic children, this is what would happen to these kids. And so we reached a crisis in that families who maybe one parent had already come to the United States and was sending money home, or a parent had disappeared and the child was living with the grandparent. And what we found was that these was no longer safe enough conditions for these children to remain in their country, and the families had to make the choice to send these children on their own to the United States. That was a better option than remaining where they were. And so these children, or these children were in a position where they had nobody to protect them, and they chose to come to the United States. And they got to the United States by walking, by riding a train we called the Beast, hundreds of miles, days after days, to arrive at the southern border of the United States to turn themselves in to the Department of Homeland Security. And the Department of Homeland Security would place them in what the kids call the chiller, which is a detention facility. And it's called the chiller because it was cold, because it was air conditioned. And this is the first time many of these children had ever had air conditioning or felt air conditioning. And if the child was lucky enough, they had in their pocket a piece of paper with the name of an aunt or a grandmother or a friend from the village or a cousin or a sister or a brother. And if they could tell Department of Homeland Security, this is the person who I'm to go to, then they could call that person, the person would go through a brief background check, and the child would be released. And so what we found is New Orleans and Louisiana has always had a very strong tie to Central America. I jokingly refer to us as the northernmost capital of Latin America. We have the same issues of corruption and politics. Anyway, we have a very strong tie with Central America. Mostly we have through Honduras, and because of the shipping and the port and the fruit companies and things like that. And so we already have had a vibrant Central American population here in Louisiana. And so we received a large number of these children. And in fact, at the beginning, the numbers were around 1,800 kids. Over time, we believe that number is probably actually closer to 4,000. When this crisis started in the late spring or early summer of 2014, so here we are. We have no pro bono providers. We have lots of kids being placed with families who have lots of needs, who maybe are undocumented themselves, who are, facing issues of poverty, facing issues of access. And these children, while they're being placed with these families, are also being placed into deportation proceedings, where the U.S. government actively tries to deport them from the United States. And while they have a right to an attorney in those proceedings, no attorney is appointed to them. And so we expect an 8-year-old kid who doesn't speak English to be able to navigate the incredibly complex, draconian law that is immigration in the United States. And many of these children actually had ways to stay in the United States, either through asylum claims or through a relief we call special immigrant juvenile status. And special immigrant juvenile status is a relief designed for the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. If a child can show that they have been abused, abandoned, or neglected by one or both parents, and it's not safe for them to return to the home country, they can have an avenue to stay in the United States. So most of these kids had at least one avenue of relief, if not more, but they needed a lawyer to find it for them. And so we've already talked about how New Orleans and Louisiana has no lawyers or no pro bono providers in the spring of 2014. And we had but the immigration community was very aware of it. In my office, we had a very active pro bono practice, and we went from seeing 1 or 2 of these cases in a year to having 4 or 5 of them walk through our office in a week. And it wasn't just us, it was everybody. And I was at a fundraiser at a church, and everybody kept walking up to me going, "What are we going to do about these kids? What are we going to do about these kids?" And then finally, and somebody even said to me, "We shouldn't do anything for these kids because it will just keep them coming." And I got mad. And then I started thinking, well, the first key to these kids is to find a way to keep them safe. And that's what I can do as a lawyer, right? I know how to navigate the legal system. I can't solve all of it. I can't solve narco-terrorism. I can't solve extreme poverty. But I can solve how to lawyer for a kid. And I bet I could get enough of my friends together, and I could convince them all to take a case pro bono, and I'll mentor them, and I'll walk them through it, and then I can say, maybe we can get lawyers for like a couple kids, and that'd be a really good thing. And so then I started talking about it to people I knew, and a little piece got done in a blog, and then one of our illustrious politicians made a very anti-immigrant statement to the press about these kids in Louisiana. And the next thing I knew, my little project was not a little project anymore, because it was about solutions. It was about solving the pieces I knew I could solve. And I started the project around 4th of July weekend in 2014. We had our first training session in September of 2014. Through the working group that we had put together, through basically calling everybody in my Rolodex and sending out multiple emails and strong-arming people to donate their time to come and speak, we had a phenomenal showing of 120 attorneys at the CLE, and that included state court judges, because special immigrant juvenile status has a state court piece and an immigration court piece, agency providers, and we ended up in that first round by working with the local nonprofits. We matched attorneys for over 60 children in one day. And we did it on a budget of about $70. 25 of that was for the CLE accreditation, and the rest of it was to buy bread and peanut butter so that everybody could have lunch. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I couldn't have done it without, and so out of that amazing day, we have done some amazing things as well. We have created dialogues with local state judges and courts. We've changed the way that these types of cases are processed through different state courts. We have created dialogues with nonprofits that used to not really talk to each other. And so we've created a way to make sure that we've been able to coordinate our dollars, our efforts, to make sure that we cover as much ground as possible. We've been able to shape the way this issue has been talked about in Louisiana and in the city of New Orleans. We have taken it out of the political realm of immigration and made it very clearly an issue about children. We've made it an issue about the humanitarian crisis that it is. And over time, we've been able to match another, I think we're up to another 30 kids who've gotten lawyers through PB&J. And so that's more than one direct service provider could provide in about a year. So we're very proud of that. We've also been able to get this issue into the minds of people who hadn't really thought about these issues before. And that makes a big difference. And now, as we are facing the secondary and tertiary issues of having 4,000 children who have suffered human trafficking and sexual abuse and physical abuse, and now we're facing these issues of how do we bring them into our community? How do we make sure they have enough education? How do we make sure they have enough health care? How do we make sure they have social workers? Because I'll tell you, there's 2 Spanish-speaking social workers in New Orleans. And so how do we do that? How do we solve those problems? Well, so now I have a working group coming up next week to address that issue. And I'm hoping that we can start replicating some of the structures that we used in PB&J and use them to solve different issues. And I think those structures are really important, which is the idea of communicating with each other and not protecting little fiefdoms. And I think when you have, and that's a really hard thing to do. What I realized in doing PB&J, and it's something that actually is that everybody wants to help. They just need to be told what to do. And PB&J was good at that. Oh, you speak Spanish? Great. I can hook you up with this person who needs a translator. You know how to do this part of the law? Great. I can hook you up with this person who needs this help. And so I had no idea how wonderful the world was until I really started doing this project, because our world is filled with how much things can't be accomplished. I don't know about your Facebook feed, but mine depresses me. And this made me feel like we could change the world one kid at a time. And it wrought a huge change in my life. I ended up stepping away from my firm and launching a solo practice so that I could spend more time with this project. It has changed the way I think about myself. It's changed the way I think about my community. At the beginning, everybody said, well, you know, aren't people against what you're doing? Aren't people, and I at first I was like, Florida, it's like, oh, well, immigration's so political. And I was like, well, maybe they just know better than to say it to my face, which could be part of it. But also, this is being able to teach people that it's a humanitarian issue. And really, I had the best issue ever. I had kids holding kittens. You know, nobody's going to fight you on that. But what I found was that, you know, it was, how do I put this? It was easier than I thought it was to make such a big change. And I didn't realize how big that change was until now. Thank you. You got it? Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, and thank you so much for your amazing work. Our second honoree is another amazing, amazing leader in New Orleans. She is the founder of Women with a Vision. She is herself a visionary. She has made it her life's work to bring marginalized women to the center of concern, to provide services and help and legal help to women who are suffering from addiction, who have entered into sex work, who are transgender women, the women that really society forgets all too often. I'm going to ask her to come and tell her story. Deon Haywood, the founder of Women with a Vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathleen. Damn, girl. Thank you so much. And I had a conversation with Terry about a month ago about what I should say, where this award comes from. And I know it's centered on health and the well-being of women. And so I'm one of those people, I rarely ever write down what I'm going to say because I kind of get the feeling as an activist and an organizer, the words will come to me. And so I'm glad that Kathleen called out our state for all the things that's wrong with it. And it's amazing because when I was sitting down listening to Kathleen, all I could think about is, wow, yeah, these are these innocent babies who, as a society, as a global society, we should be protecting. But right here in the city of New Orleans, how people who have lived and worked for generations, and it's not how they're not seen, how we're all fighting in some way for just basic respect and basic human rights and access to care. And so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about Women with a Vision. And I came to Women with a Vision when I was 19 years old as a volunteer. I can't take that I'm the founder because I'm not. I won't take that charge. No, not you. It happens all the time. It was 8 women who all worked for different service providers in the city of New Orleans 25 years ago. And they felt like there wasn't enough being done around HIV and Black women's health. And so they decided to start Women with a Vision, and their goal was basic and really simple. And it was, we are going to create information ourselves, and we're going to bring it to the Black community, and we're going to educate women and teach them what they needed to know so they can make decisions for themselves and their families. Real basic. And we did that for the first 15 years of our existence. Post-Katrina, and whenever we say, people from New Orleans say post-Katrina, it's really big for us because something happened. Something changed, not just the loss of houses, not just the loss of lives, and a way of life that for many of us, we feel like it's slipping away 10 years later. But something shifted around how we treated people and how the federal government came in to a city that was, in my opinion, almost lost if it wasn't for many of us here fighting to come home. But they gave the Department of Justice, I want to say it was like between 2 and 4 million, I forgot the amount of money, but they gave them all this money to round up all their violent offenders. Because I'm sure many of you saw the news, many of you saw, oh, they can't find their violent offenders. They're lost. The city is out of control. Well, your city would be out of control if you went through what people went through here. But what they did was they gave this money to Louisiana to find violent offenders. And true to Louisiana's history, that's not what they did. They just targeted the most vulnerable people in our community. And I'm gonna share this part of the story because I think it's really, I find it amusing that one morning my partner and I were asleep and someone knocked at our door, and we had a cane corso, which many of you know is a large mastiff, and he was losing it because somebody was just beating at the door. It's like 5:30 in the morning. And I go to the door, and there's DEA. Every major police department or law enforcement was outside our door. And I was like, I ain't did nothing. I don't think we did anything. And I was like, can I help you? And he was like, you need to open the door. And I was like, no, not gonna happen. What do you want? Who are you? And what are you looking for? And he shows me a picture of a woman who looks so frail and afraid. And he's looking for her because she's a sex offender. And I said, can I see the paper? Can I hold it in my hand? And so when I took the paper in my hand, it was a picture of a woman who was 62 years old and who had lived at this address pre-Katrina at some point. Now, I bought this house pre-Katrina, so I don't know when she lived there. It was definitely before my partner and I. And he said, she's dangerous, and we're tracking them down, and we're gonna find them. I was like, my God, did you really come to my door? Like my door? I couldn't believe that this had fell in my lap. Because you see, post-Katrina, when Women with a Vision returned, there were many of our clients, many women who were involved in sex work. And I always have to make this separation for people because it's a problem, and I feel it's a problem. Is that when I say sex work, people automatically think trafficked. But I want people to know that the women we work with, they are involved in sex work to survive. There is no pimp involved. There is no syndicate selling them. They have made a very hard choice to sell themselves out of hunger, addiction, homelessness, or simply because I'm the working poor. And so not only are those things make life for women complicated, we've also complicated because now we have the feds and NOPD and DEA looking for poor women who really, what they needed was us. What they needed was services, and they don't exist. We've always had a history in 25 years of working with sex workers, but this was different. This wasn't about hooking you up to a service. This is about making sure you didn't do 25 years in prison for something you did to yourself, not another person. And so we start seeing large numbers of women, large numbers of trans women coming in our office with the charge of crime against nature. And the crime against nature, so you know, Statute 1489, I'm probably gonna die saying that in my sleep, Statute 1489, is the solicitation of oral or anal sex. Now, some people might say, how is that a health issue? Well, public health says vaginal sex is a less risk than anal. If you use protection, it is a less risk. And so now we have police deciding and laws deciding how we have sex and who we should have it, which y'all know the story on that piece too. That would be a whole nother panel. But we decided we were gonna fight this. Who could we talk to? There were women who came into our office. One woman, one of our founders, her name is Danita Muse, had a client. Her name was Miss Pat. Miss Pat came into our office. Miss Pat was a social worker. She worked at a local service organization, had done so for the last 20 years. After checking her property in the 9th Ward one night, and she was stopped by the police, and they ran her license and they ran her social, and they were like, "Oh, you're a sex offender and you never registered." And she was like, "I was 19 years old then. I'm almost 60." So they arrested Ms. Pat. And when they arrested her, they made all the charges retro. So she would have had to register for the next 72 years. This is a person who has a job. The judge never forced it because pre-Katrina, the judges kind of let it go. They kind of said, it just doesn't feel right that we're charging women with prostitution and it's a misdemeanor. But the state charge is a crime against nature, which is an automatic felony in the state of Louisiana, automatic 20 years unless you do a plea bargain. And how many women do you think took that plea? How many women do you think said, I'm gonna go before a court and let them decide? Or I'm just gonna plea out so I can go home to my children, to my family, to my community, or maybe get help, or maybe just not be locked up, which is a trauma in itself. I see it as an act of violence in itself that we're gonna take somebody that had to make that decision and then we're gonna lock them up for making that decision. We're not gonna do job training. We're not gonna do mental health care. We're not gonna make sure that you get everything we all have a right to have, but I'm gonna lock you up. And in doing so, I'm gonna keep feeding the prison industrial complex with people who are poor and marginalized, and mainly Black people and people of color. We're gonna continue that. And so we decided we were gonna fight. And let's see what I heard. Well, Deon, you're gonna ruin women with a vision. I mean, y'all are all Black women. Y'all have no power. You know you're a lesbian. People are gonna know. I'm like, I am as out as you can get. But whatever I heard, even from lawyers, they weren't like Kathleen. They weren't like attorney Andrea Ritchie. They weren't like Bill Quigley and the lawyers at Center for Constitutional Rights. They weren't them, because those are the people we work with. And Bill Quigley loves peanut butter and jelly. His wife would make us peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every time we went to Baton Rouge. But we fought. And it was a hard fight. It was quicker than I thought because we won. The judge ruled that it was unconstitutional. And it removed over 800 people from the sex offender registry. But and as happy as I am about that, many of those women, their lives have not changed. Because it kind of doesn't go away. See, they can remove you from the registry, but it's not removed from the registry, from your history, your arrest history. And we still haven't found a way to do that for some people. And so many of them spend a lot of days explaining non-prostitution charges from the past. Many of them spend time looking for jobs, or we have clients that have 2 degrees, 3 degrees, and I can't find a job because my past keeps following me. And you know, most women do service jobs. Most women work with people or in environments where they want a background check. Or the number of women who've missed entire primary years of their children's school because they could never go to the school because you're a sex offender. So you can't go to the school play, and you can't go trick-or-treating with your kids. Or the number of trans women who are just totally removed from the process just for being who they are. And so one of the things that I wanted to say before I ended is that it is a happy ending in the sense that for all the women and trans women and some gay men that were a part of that process, they learned that they had a voice and that it was wrong. And they had a right to speak out, and they had a right to fight, and they had a right to stand up with each other for justice. And not only did they do that, it was the first time that with this statute that women led the charge. They had tried to change it multiple times. I think it's like over 60 times throughout history they had tried to change the statute. It's been in place since, it was in place since after the Louisiana Purchase. Right, and it was started to keep gay men from having sex in the French Quarter. And so when people think about I'm always talking about harmful laws, harmful policies. If you could do one thing for me, wherever you are in this country, please think about when people put out bills and they sound like it's good, it's probably not. It's probably not for the people who we're supposed to protect. See, when you tell people we're gonna arrest prostitutes, keep our neighborhood safe, does that sound right to y'all? No. Does it sound like we're gonna rebuild our community? We're gonna make sure these women have all that reproductive justice in this country should be giving them? Or the number of women who are sitting right up the street at Tulane and Broad, as we say in New Orleans, at the jail that it's the size of a prison, for all the young women that are sitting there who, once you enter the prison, you automatically lose the rights to your children. In Louisiana, we have a habit of using the criminal justice system to fix the people we think are broken. And so if you could do anything for me, is we have to pay attention to who we put in office. We have to pay attention to what's their agenda and who's talking to them. And we have to make sure that we're protecting the most vulnerable of us in our community. And sometimes the most vulnerable is people like me and other members of Women with a Vision, because after that historic legislative win, because I asked Bill Quigley, I said, what do we do now? He's like, I don't know, we never won. He was like, you do know there are no wins, Deon. I was like, there are no wins? He was like, there are no wins. He was like, we fight hard and we get people to notice, but rarely do we win. And I say, wait, you mean the poor black women? We won, and we won big, and it's never been done, and we won in the South. We did that? And he was like, yeah. And so one night we're sitting down and we're happy, and we get a call that our office has been firebombed. So when you talk about what violence looks like in this country, for those of us who are on the line, protecting those who are behind the line, it looks like losing your entire office. It looks like walking in and having the police, because the police don't really like me here, say that not another member of Women with a Vision could enter with you, that I had to enter something so traumatic by myself, but that I would enter and there would be a table and every breast model for our free breast exam classes that we give, and for every uterus and every fallopian tube was set on fire. It was the room targeted, our education room. And nobody did anything. To this day, we don't know who did it. All we know is there was a white male running from the scene. And the police said it's probably one of your clients. And so when you leave here today, I want you to not only think about the people who are running this country, who are supposed to be working for us, and the things that they do to us, but what they do to the people Kathleen is protecting, what they do to the women, just everyday people. And just so you know, we called our policy brief just a talking crime, because not one time did police ever catch anybody in the act of anything. So I can leave here today in my nice lacy black shoes, and they could decide they don't like what I look like today and arrest me. And so I leave you with not just this great story, but I want you to think about a story of access and removal. What it means to remove people from their communities, what it means to continue to remove them in and out for things that really should be a public health issue and not a criminal issue. But also in a city that's in recovery and leaving people out. Thank you.
All right, before both of these women make me start weeping, I do want to note it is 4:40. We're a little bit late for the workshops, but that is all right. This is now, and we are moving forward. Thank you all so much for being here. Let's have one more round of applause for our amazing, amazing women. And I truly want to stay in touch with both of you with the amazing work that you're doing. I know that this kind of work is a template for work that can be done in community after community after community around the country. We really need to continue working together. Thank you both so much. All right. All right. So now we are on break. We will get to the workshops, and we're going to have, what did you want me to do for Poppy? Texas now is, oh, Liz, what? All right, so we can't fit the whole room. But okay, Poppy, would you? Yeah, all right. So we're doing pictures. Okay, Poppy, in 30 seconds, explain what you want.
Hi, I'm Poppy Northcutt from Texas Now. We're standing 6 blocks away from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which 10 days ago devastated access to abortion in the second most populous state in the United States. So we have a bunch of banners here. We were there over at the court this morning, but we would love to have a crowd shot of now people showing that you stand with Texas women supporting our right to abortion. If you'd come forward, so with this background, we would appreciate it. Won't take but a minute.